right?
Right.
If you don't know where you are, then you don't know where you're going.
What a wise saying.
Oh, thanks.
But like, let's
I was a philosophy,
minor.
I guess, in undergrad.
Yeah.
Socrates.
All right, Plato.
See, it's getting interesting now.
But like, let's say you use these UWorld assessment exams.
Aristotle.
What?
Aristotle.
What about him?
Well, I thought we were just saying names.
Kant.
It's Kant.
Kant. All right. Hey guys, welcome back.
Welcome back.
So, today's video we're going to be talking about step 1 and how we studied for it and what we think is a good approach. Everyone has their own approach, but this is totally our opinion. And you kind of figure out as you go, but these were the steps that we took.
Yeah, first I would like to say, like, step 1 was the scariest for me in particular because back then it wasn't pass and fail. So it was a lot of pressure to get the highest score possible. And being from the Caribbean, a lot of friends that I had did fail, did drop out during the course. So it was like very stressful period in life. And the resources that I used in particular were Patoma, Dr. Najib, and UWorld. No one skips UWorld. You have to do UWorld. I did it, I think, 2 times, and the third time I did it like real rapid. Because by the third time you already know all the questions, you know everything already. It's just to, get all the material in one setting and kind of have it fresh. What do you think?
UWorld is something that you have to use for step 1. Because it basically covers all the fundamental questions that you're going to kind of see on step 1. They do a very good job at mimicking the format and the time. Although they give you 4 blocks instead of the 8 blocks that you're probably going to get on the exam, it's still a really good representation of what the exam is going to be like. So if you keep practicing with UWorld and then supplement that with materials like first aid, Pathoma, Sketchy, those things will really allow you to enhance your score. But more specifically, right, since you were in IMG, right, what approaches did you take, and did you set up any type of schedule, or did you have anything other than the resources that kind of helped you out?
So when I finished my second year, I had to take step 1. I had 2 months to really study for it. And the material was kind of fresh in my head because, you're in school, you just, finished all the basic sciences. It's basically about just reviewing it really quickly and getting to the questions. So I focused a lot on questions, and whenever I got a question wrong, I would go back and review the material. And the way I studied was, I had a very strict schedule, wake up in the morning, have a quick breakfast and get right into studying. Study for 1 hour or 50 minutes, take a 10-minute break. And in that break, I would lay down, close my eyes, 5 minutes, drift off. And then the other 5 minutes, review everything that I did in those 50 minutes of practice questions or learning material. So you study for like 50 minutes and then you rest for 10 minutes and you study for 50 minutes. That keeps you refreshed and that keeps you, motivated to keep going. And that's how I studied for around 2 or 3 months, and then, I took the test.
Speaking personally from my own perspective, since I was a DO at that time, and just of note, I know that the step and maybe the level might change their pass grade format to just pass fail. Sorry, the grading format to just pass fail, right? However, I don't think these strategies are going to change because the content, no matter how much you want to change the grading format, you can't change medicine itself. So what they're looking for is essentially the same components as they've always been looking for, but they're just making it pass fail now so that you don't get any type of discrimination on the application end based on your actual test score, right? So in terms of these strategies, I think they're going to be easily carried over when it comes to actually preparing for this step if you are going to take it in the year 2022. Even if you're going to take it right now and you might get a numerical score, that's even better. It's going to definitely carry over. But from my own perspective, since I was a DO student, I had to take both the COMLEX and the STEP. So I took both and I gave myself a 5-week window of just pure dedicated. And prior to that, I wasn't really preparing for STEP. I was mainly focused on my core classes. And in that 5-year dedicated period is when I really started doing UWorld. Once the dedicated period hit, I thought it was really beneficial that I didn't even touch UWorld like that. Because when you're getting a first look at a question, you have to really think about it. But if you're getting a second, third, fourth look at a question, it's almost like you're on autopilot. You're just gonna be like, click, answer, I know it, move on. But you don't really take some time and really think about, hey, what is this question really asking me? So my main source of studying was UWorld, and I would just attack UWorld. And if I didn't understand something in the question stem, I would try and find an answer solution. Or if I thought two answers were close to each other, I would kind of see the explanation in the solution end of it too. If I wanted to find out more where the solution in UWorld didn't provide it for me, that's when these extra resources came in. And so you just kind of have to identify what kind of learner you are. Because some people learn visually, that's me. I liked watching videos. It was much more easier for me to understand. So Sketchy Farm, Sketchy Micro, those were amazing for me. And Boards and Beyond was also amazing for me.
Boards and Beyond was really good.
Yeah.
If you really want to know why something happens,
Yeah.
he explains it very well.
Yeah. Basically, Pathoma is also video-based too, but I never touched first aid. I know a lot of medical
It's just
students.
bullet points.
Yeah, it's bullet points.
Bullet points.
So it's not that you have to go crazy at first aid, because first aid is not going to show you how the question is translated into words, right? Those bullet points have to be translated into a question stem. But your critical thinking is mainly going to come from doing questions.
Right.
It's the most fundamental thing I'd say for any strategy. What I used in my strategy was that I only did one pass of UWorld. And my second pass, I took a break because I felt myself plateau after a certain point. Right. In the UWorld assessment exams, I'm seeing, okay, I'm doing better. And then at some point, I'm like, what's going on? You know?
Right.
But for step one, I kind of took the strategy of doing these questions and having one look at it and trying to get my critical thinking down. Then I would take a little break from it, like a 3-4 day hiatus. And those 3-4 days were the best thing that could have happened to me, because I found out that I was too involved in my studying, you know, and then that messes with your mind, like, oh man, is this question asking it this way? Or you're nitpicking on the detail in the question stem and you trick yourself and you pick the wrong answer. So you start overthinking. So when I took that break and let my mind relax, it allowed me to see the question more broadly, and I was able to improve my score drastically. And then I just repeated my wrong choices that I got in UWorld, and instead of doing UWorld again, what I decided to do was, let me use a different resource of a question bank. So I went to USMLE RX, and I thought that was really beneficial because it covered a lot of things that UWorld necessarily didn't really go too in depth for.
I feel like you have to use different resources, not just to see what you like, but also because some cover different materials.
Yeah.
So you have to get all the material basically for the step one, because you never know what you'll be tested on.
And one thing that I regretted was that I didn't start prepping for STEP before that dedicated period, right? I think that if I prepped a little bit more in my second year, it would have made my time studying in my dedicated period a lot more easier. So prep a little bit earlier, but I think the main point here is that questions. That's what you have to do. Right? And whatever you want to supplement that with, you do that. That's your strategy. Don't go on Reddit and be like, oh man, this dude is doing this, so he's getting this score. I gotta do this, you know?
And there's a way to go about the questions, right? Yeah. And we'll you know, talk about that too in a later video.
Dude, Reddit messes with your mind, honestly.
Yeah. Reddit social media messes with your mind.
No, because you're on these forums, right? And you're on Reddit, and then you read on Reddit, oh my god, this guy got like a 2,000 on his
It's all lies. On social media,
this.
Reddit, everyone who posts on Reddit that they got a 300 or whatever on USMLE Step 1 is a lie. So Step 1 for me was like 3 years ago. I think 2 or 3 years. Almost 3 years ago. So it's kind of like a hazy memory. But you know, you have to work hard. You have to be consistent in studying. And you have to test yourself using NBMEs. They are very important. Those you cannot skip. You have to do the NBMEs because that's the old test, right? You have to do the old test to kind of know what they're testing, to know how they tested. So it's a very good idea to do the NBMEs. I've had a couple of friends who didn't do NBMEs and they did well. I had a couple of friends who didn't do the NBME and did not do too well. The thing is, you have to cover all your bases. If you have a resource provided by the people who make the actual test, you better use that resource, right?
Yeah. And one thing I want to mention here is that these test banks or these question banks or whatever you're using, UWorld assessment exams, right? They're exactly what the name states. They're assessments, right? So you should be using those assessments to kind of gauge where you are in your learning process. But
100%.
I wouldn't use those things as a definitive answer to, hey, this is what my score is going to look like.
For me, it was the average of the test, and for some other people, I had a friend scoring really high on the assessments, like 250s. And on the real thing, he ended up not doing too well. And he actually ended up failing. And I had some friends who didn't do too well on the assessments and ended up doing really well. So there is a factor of luck involved also, because the USMLE Step 1 might have topics that you're good at, because the questions are not completely, separate into definite categories, right? Sometimes they might have more of a category of what you're good at, and then you might get lucky. You're like, oh, I know all of these questions. And sometimes they might have questions on a topic you're weak at, and then you might be like, oh.
Yeah. So these assessment exams, for me personally, it wasn't a representation of what I got on the exam, because I ended up doing better on the exam for my step 1 than what my assessment exams were telling me, right? But I would still use these exams as a way to gauge how much improvement I've been doing. So my strategy mainly was to do the questions during the week and then do an assessment exam at the end of every week to see, hey, am I improving? Where am I lacking on? When I review the answers,
you have to consistently gauge where you're at in order to get better, right? If you don't know where you are, then you don't know where you're going.
What a wise saying.
Oh, thanks.
But
I was a philosophy
minor,
I guess, in undergrad.
Yeah.
Socrates.
All right, Plato.
See, it's getting interesting now.
but let's say you use these UWorld assessment exams.
Aristotle.
What?
Aristotle.
What about him?
Well, I thought we were just saying names.
Kant.
It's Kant.
Kant. All right. But let's say you use these assessment exams, right? And you're gauging yourself. One thing that I would recommend to you guys is, when you're reviewing these assessment exams, right, review the wrong answers, not just for what answer was correct, but why you got the answer wrong to begin with. Like, was it, hey, did I not understand this part of the question stem?
Or you just didn't know, the information.
Or you didn't know the information, or were you confused about the answer?
Right.
Because if you can identify that, then you can be very specific in how you're gonna improve after that, right? You're not gonna waste time then, because one thing that's really important when you're doing a dedicated period of studying for STEP exam or for any board exam is that you have to be very concise with your time. You have to make sure that you use your time efficiently and you learn whatever you need to learn within that set amount of time that you have, right? So definitely be very thoughtful of how you use your time when you're reviewing the answers.
Yeah, that was very good.
Yeah.
And I think if you remain dedicated and disciplined throughout your study period, you'll do well. If you do all the right things and you use the right material and you do all the questions, you should be able to, get through this step 1 and step 2 hill, or the mountain, or sea.
All right. Do you want to touch on any more topics? I think we've pretty much covered it all. I think the main thing here is remember guys, disciplined and do questions. Definitely make sure you're coming up with your own strategy. Don't just follow other people. See what works best for you. Find out what type of learner you are, and go from there.
So, actually, on that point, I had a friend who was getting like crazy high assessment scores, right? And I was asking him, what are you doing differently than me? And, he wasn't doing anything differently. He was just doing assessments. He was doing UWorld. He was using, Patoma and First Aid, just like I was, but he was scoring 250s. So for him, when he took the real step 1, he failed. I don't know what went wrong, but, you can't jump the gun also. You have to take the assessments, and you have to be very critical of yourself. Really know what you know and what you don't know. That's the hardest part.
For sure.
Knowing what you don't know is the biggest step you can take.
Yeah.
And the hardest step.
For sure. But for just now, more specifically, right? In terms of, I think we've pretty much covered the step 1 preparation.
I think.
Now, if you're specifically for DO students, right? The strategy I used for setting up my board exam, so I didn't use any other specific resource for the DO Comlex, right? I used the UWorld, I used Pathoma, Sketchy, and Boards and Beyond, those resources that I mentioned. And other than that, my step studying and my level studying were almost identical. But what I did was I set the exam 3 days apart, right? So I took step 1 first and I got that out of the way. And in those 2 days, right, or 3 days that you have in between your 2 schedules, in those 2 days, I used the Savarese book and just filled in the OMM knowledge, right? Because that's the additional component on the exam that you need to know for the Comlex. And that was it. That's all I needed to do my Comlex exam. So I mirrored my step and Comlex studying together and then just supplemented that with the Savarese OMM book for those 2 days, and I just went through those concepts really quickly and I took the exam and got it over with. And thankfully everything went okay, man.
Yeah.
You know?
So if you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe and ring the bell. Ding!
Also, if you have any questions, make sure you comment in the
Comment below.
comment section below. Alright, guys? We'll catch you on the next one.